He joked when he asked me to marry him, half laughing, half daring me to take him seriously. But weeks later, when he knelt in front of me with tears on his cheeks, I realized something had shifted in him, something he never meant for me to see. And I just stood there, smiling, because I finally understood the truth behind his joke. My name is Liana, and I've known Marcus since the summer we were both too young to understand love. We grew up in a quiet coastal town where the fog rolled in before sunrise and secrets traveled slower than the tide. Marcus always hid his feelings behind humor, a shield he wore like armor. I thought I knew what his laughter meant, what his silence meant. But I was wrong. The real story began the night he made a joke that wasn't really a joke at all. The fire was dying down when he did it. A thin line of smoke curled toward the night sky, slipping between the stars like it didn't want to be noticed. The waves were soft behind us, slow breaths against the sand. Someone's speaker hummed an old love song, the kind that feels borrowed from another lifetime. Marcus stood up, brushing ash from his jeans. He looked at me the way people look at something they're afraid to touch, gently, quickly, almost apologetic. Then he kneeled. And for a moment, even the ocean held still. I remember the warmth from the fire touching only half my face. The other half stayed cold, like my body couldn't decide whether to believe what was happening. Our friends cheered before he'd even spoken. They were half drunk on the night, half hopeful for a spectacle. Someone clapped. Someone else whistled. The sparks rising from the logs looked like tiny golden mistakes drifting into the dark. Marcus held a soda tab ring between his fingers, a joke, or maybe a shield. It glinted in the firelight like something that wanted to mean more. "Marry me?" he said, in that teasing voice he used when he didn't want to show what he really felt. Everyone laughed. Even he laughed, but he didn't look at me. Not right away. His hand trembled, small, barely there. But the way a hand trembles when it carries a truth, it doesn't know how to hold. I laughed too, because that was the script the moment demanded. I nudged his shoulder. "You're ridiculous," I whispered. He stood, brushed sand from his knees, and took a deep bow as if the whole thing had been a performance. But when he passed by me to sit down, his smile faded too fast, like it slipped off before he could catch it. The night stretched on, slow and gentle. Our friends drifted into smaller conversations, forgetting the moment as quickly as it came. Drinks were refilled. Someone poked the fire with a stick until the embers glowed like a heartbeat. Marcus stayed quiet. He sat slightly apart from the group, arms resting loosely on his knees, staring at the water as if it was repeating something he didn't want to hear. I watched him from the corner of my eye, the way his jaw tightened when someone teased him. "So Marcus, first proposal of the night, huh?" He forced a laugh, a soft exhale that died halfway out. When the bonfire thinned to a whisper, we packed up. Plastic cups rustled, sand shifted under our shoes. The wind had grown colder, brushing against our skin with a warning. We walked home along the shoreline, our footprints forming twin trails until the tide erased them one by one. He didn't speak. Not even small talk, not even about the moon, which hung low and orange, like it wanted to ask its own questions. Finally, I said, "You're awfully quiet." He nodded, "Just tired." But his voice sounded hollow, like an empty room pretending someone still lived there. Halfway home, he stopped. Just stopped. I nearly walked past him. The sand, cool now, pressed between my toes as I turned back. He was staring at the ground, hands buried in his pockets as though he needed something to hold that wasn't me. "You know it was a joke, right?" he murmured. The wind carried his words away almost before I caught them. I said, "Of course," too quickly, too lightly. He lifted his head, and for the first time since the bonfire, our eyes met. There was something fragile in his expression, not fear exactly, but the kind of hope people hide behind their ribs where they think no one will look. "I didn't mean to make it weird," he said. "It wasn't weird." He nodded again, but the lie didn't land. It hovered between us like the mist creeping off the waves. When we started walking again, I noticed the tremor in his hand. The same one from before, only clearer now, as if the night had peeled back whatever he'd used to hide it. He shoved both hands deeper into his pockets. "You ever say something," he whispered, "and the second it leaves your mouth, you realize maybe you weren't joking at all?" I didn't answer, and he didn't explain. But the silence that followed felt heavier than the words. Back home, the house was dark, breathing its usual quiet. I went inside first, Marcus lingered on the porch as if crossing the threshold. Might break something in him. In my room, I changed out of my sand-dusted clothes, but my mind stayed on the beach, on his voice, on that almost confession. When I turned off the light, the room fell into a soft blue from the street lamp outside. I lay there listening to the hum of the night, replaying everything, the kneel, the soda tab ring, the tremor, the smile he wore that never reached his eyes. Was it really just a joke, or the closest he could come to telling me the truth? Sleep didn't come easily. The last thing I remember is the faint sound of the door clicking shut. Downstairs, gentle, careful, as if he didn't want the house to hear him break. The house had a way of breathing at night, slow, uneven, like it was listening for footsteps that never came. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, feeling the cool floor press against my skin. The lights were off. The house had a way of breathing at night, slow, uneven, like it was listening for footsteps that never came. I stood in the hallway, barefoot, feeling the cool floor press against my skin. The lights were off, but the moon slipped through the curtains, drawing soft silver lines across the living room. That's when I saw him, Marcus, sitting in the dark again. He wasn't moving, not really, just holding something in his hand, turning it once, twice, like a thought he couldn't shake loose. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and chose not to look up. And in that quiet, something inside me folded, soft, slow. Almost sound. The days after the bonfire felt wrong in ways I couldn't name. Marcus didn't joke anymore. Not the small ones he'd toss over his shoulder while making coffee. Not the teasing ones he'd whisper when we were running late. Not even the sarcastic ones he used when he wanted to avoid real feelings. It was like someone had reached inside him and turned the volume all the way down. Some mornings I'd catch him opening his mouth as if to speak, only to close it again. A half sentence left hanging in the air, a breath unfinished. And then there were his eyes, always searching mine, always pulling away when I tried to hold his gaze. Our friends didn't help. They laughed every time the proposal came up, nudging him, nudging me, nudging a moment that no longer felt funny. Each time Marcus stiffened, just a small shift in his shoulders, but enough to make the air thicken. When I touched his arm, he'd smile, but not with his eyes, not even close. One evening I set 2 plates on the table, the steam rising between us like a fragile question. He barely ate, he barely spoke, and the space between us, once warm and familiar, felt like a hallway leading into a room neither of us wanted to open. I tried to be gentle about it. We were folding laundry, the sun playing through the window, catching dust in the air. He kept rubbing the hem of a shirt between his fingers, over and over, like the fabric could answer something he was afraid to ask. "Marcus," I said softly. He didn't look up. "You've been quiet." He nodded as if agreeing with the weather, as if silence was something that just happened to him. "I'm here," I added after a moment. This time he did look at me, only for a second, but I felt the weight of it, like he was standing at the edge of a truth he didn't know how to step into. "It's nothing," he murmured. The words were thin, too thin. After that, things only grew stranger. He'd start to speak. "Do you ever..." I was thinking maybe, the other night, then let the rest fall away, swallowed by whatever storm lived behind his ribs. At dinner with friends, someone raised a glass and laughed. "To these two! And that proposal! What a moment!" Everyone laughed, everyone except Marcus. His jaw tightened. His fingers curled around his glass until his knuckles whitened. He excused himself early, claiming a headache. But I knew better. Something was echoing inside him. And every mention of that night struck the same raw place. And he didn't know how to cover the sound. That night, the one with the moonlight sliding through the curtains, I found him alone. No TV, no phone, not even the lamp turned on. Just Marcus sitting on the edge of the couch, like the dark room, was the only place he could breathe. "Marcus?" I whispered. His shoulders tensed, just once, like a ripple in still water. He didn't look back. I stepped closer, the floor creaking softly beneath me. "What are you holding?" He turned his hand an inch, letting a sliver of moon catch the object. It was small, metallic, the kind of thing that could fit inside a closed fist but never truly disappear. A ring, but not the ring. Not a proposal ring, just something simple. Worn around the edges, like he'd been carrying it long before the bonfire. His thumb moved over it again, slow, nervous, almost tender. "I didn't mean for it to be a joke," he said finally. his voice quiet enough to break. The words hung there, suspended, trembling between us. He still wouldn't look at me. I thought if I said it with everyone around, if I pretended, he swallowed, maybe it wouldn't scare me so much. There it was, the truth inside the silence. Not fear of me, fear of himself, fear of wanting something too much, fear of the weight of his own heart. And for the first time I saw it. The way his fingers shook, the way the ring pressed into his palm like it hurt to hold, the way he seemed afraid of the person he might become if he let himself hope. I sat beside him, not touching him, not speaking, just breathing with him. The moon traced a pale line across his cheek. Catching the shimmer in his eyes, he refused to let fall. He finally looked at me, really looked, and there was something raw there, like he'd peeled back. A part of himself he never meant to show. The ring closed inside his hand with a soft sound. Barely a click, barely anything at all, but I heard it, deep, in a place I didn't know was listening. I don't know what to do, he whispered, and I didn't answer. The morning light drifted into the house like it was unsure of its place, soft and pale, touching only the edges of the furniture. I remember standing there with a cloth in my hand, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. The whole house felt like it was breathing slowly, watching me. I wasn't looking for anything, just dusting, just passing time the way people do when they're waiting for a feeling to settle. But the day had other plans, and it began with the small click of a desk drawer sliding open. Marcus's desk wasn't forbidden, but it wasn't somewhere I lingered either. It held little things he kept to himself, old receipts, keys he never used, loose screws from projects he never finished. The drawer stuck halfway. It always did. I tugged it gently, expecting the usual resistance. Instead, something thin caught on the wooden edge, fluttering like a trapped wing. A folded piece of paper, cream-colored, soft at the corners as though held too many times. I almost put it back. Almost. But the house had gone too still. Like even the walls were waiting for me to touch it. The handwriting on the front wasn't his. Not even close. He writes in neat, careful lines. This was rushed, slanted, the ink darker where the pen had pressed too hard. I didn't unfold it right away. I held it in both hands, feeling the weight of something I didn't understand yet. And for a moment, the silence around me changed. Not broken, just sharpened. Like I'd stepped into the middle of a sentence someone didn't want me to finish. The paper opened with a dry whisper. Inside, just a few lines, but they felt like they were written years too late. Don't repeat the same mistake. You deserve a real chance this time. Some things aren't meant to be jokes. At the bottom, a name was scratched out so violently the paper tore. Whoever signed it didn't want to be remembered, or didn't want me to know they existed. My thumb traced the torn spot. It felt cold. A breeze moved through the hallway, though no window was open. For the first time in days, I wondered if Marcus's strange quiet wasn't about me at all. Maybe it was about whoever wrote this, and whatever he'd promised them. I folded the letter carefully, almost respectfully, and placed it on the desk. Not inside, just there, waiting, like a truth left in the open. Hours later, when the sun dipped, behind the trees and the house softened into that blue evening haze, I heard Marcus come home. Keys on the table, shoes pushed off with tired feet. A sigh heavier than it should have been. He walked past the doorway to his desk, then stopped. I heard the shift in his breathing before I saw his face. He entered slowly, like someone stepping into a memory they feared. His eyes went first to the desk, then to the letter, then to me. Color drained from him so fast it was like watching frost spread across glass. Where did you find that? His voice wasn't angry, just small, unsteady. In your drawer, I said softly. I wasn't looking. It just slipped out. He closed his eyes, only for a second. But in that second, he looked older, tired in a way I'd never seen. You weren't supposed to see that, he whispered. Not that isn't what you think. Not it's nothing. Just you weren't supposed to see. I took a step toward him, but he stepped back. A quiet, instinctive recoil, like a person afraid of leaving dirty footprints on a clean floor. Marcus, I said, talk to me. But he was staring at the letter like it was a doorway he didn't want to walk through. His hands trembled. Not wildly, just enough that I noticed the slight shake of his knuckles. It's old, he finally murmured. Before anything made sense. Who wrote it? My voice was barely above a whisper. He swallowed hard, eyes drifting toward the window as if the fading light might give him courage. Someone who thought they knew what was best for me. A pause. Someone who was probably right. The room held its breath. What mistake? I asked. His jaw tightened. His shoulders rose, then fell. When I proposed at the bonfire, he stopped, started again. It wasn't just a joke. It wasn't supposed to be one. My chest felt tight, not hurt, just afraid of what might come next. But you laughed, I said. You turned it into a joke. I had to, he whispered. You don't know the things I've ruined by wanting too much. He sank into the chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. The letter lay between us like a thin crack in the floor. I was scared, he continued. Not of losing you, of becoming the version of me that hurt someone before. Something in his voice splintered at the edges. A quiet break, barely there. That letter, he said, was the last thing they ever gave me. A warning. And I've kept it, because I'm still afraid they were right. He finally looked at me, really looked. I don't want to repeat the same mistake, he said. And the joke? The joke was the closest I've come. The house felt colder then. Not from the air, but from the space between his words. I sat beside him, not touching, just close enough for him to know I wasn't leaving the room. The sun had slipped completely now, leaving only the soft glow of the desk lamp. It cast long shadows across the floor. Quiet ones, stretching like thoughts we weren't ready to finish. Marcus stared at the letter. And I stared at him, wondering how many parts of a person can stay hidden until they're held up to the light. There are moments that change the shape of a relationship. Not loudly, not dramatically, just softly, like a page turning itself. That night, as the shadows deepened, I realized this wasn't just about a joke, or a letter, or a past he tried to outrun. This was the beginning of something we hadn't named yet, and I wasn't sure whether it was meant to save us or unravel us. The house was quiet in a way that didn't belong to houses. Not the soft kind of quiet that comes after rain, the other kind, the kind that holds its breath. A single lamp glowed in the corner of the living room, throwing long, tired shadows across the floorboards. Marcus sat on the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned the color of old paper. He didn't look up when I walked in. He didn't even flinch. It felt like stepping into the eye of a storm that had been waiting for me. I eased the door shut behind me, letting the latch click softly, the way you would close a door on a sleeping child. But Marcus wasn't asleep. His whole body was too still for that. The kind of stillness you learn only after you've spent years bracing for impact. The lamp hummed. Somewhere in the kitchen, the faucet dripped once, then remembered its silence. I made tea, I murmured. My voice sounded small in the room, like it didn't want to wake anything. He didn't answer, just swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the carpet between his feet. For days, something had been unraveling between us. Little threads, pulled too tight. Conversations that started as whispers and ended as nothing. Smiles that never made it past the mouth. And now the weight of the past, his past, sat in the room with us, big enough to take its own seat. I walked closer, every step tapping lightly against the floor, like the house was listening again. When I sat beside him, he finally breathed. Not deeply, not peacefully, just enough to remind himself he was still here. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, he whispered. His voice cracked in the middle, like it had been used too many times today. What wasn't? I kept my tone soft, as if the wrong kind of sound would make him shatter. He rubbed his palms together, slow, nervous. A quiet rhythm, almost desperate. When I joked that night at the beach, I didn't mean for it to come out that way. He paused, jaw tightening. But I also didn't mean for it to feel so real. The words drifted between us, fragile and half afraid of being heard. My heartbeat stuttered, but I stayed still. Our friends laughed, he continued. And I laughed too because I was supposed to. But the moment you looked at me, I felt it, this pull. He finally met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw no defenses. Just a man terrified of himself. I saw their faces, their teasing, their assumptions. And all I could think was, what if you said, yes, just because everyone expected you to? What if I trapped you without meaning to? He breathed out shakily, fingers curling into fists. I've done that before, he whispered. Someone said yes when they shouldn't have. And it ruined us. The room grew smaller around his confession. His eyes drifted somewhere far behind me, to a time I couldn't reach. I was young, he began, voice barely there. Too young to understand what forever meant. I asked her because I thought that's what love was. Two people holding on, even when one of them wasn't ready. His throat tightened around the memory. She said yes, but not because she wanted to build a life with me. She said yes because she didn't know how to say no. He swallowed hard, the sound heavy in the quiet room. And every day after that, she slipped away a little more. The lamp's glow flickered, brushing the edge of his profile with a fragile warmth. I watched her lie to herself, lie to me, and I kept pretending it didn't hurt. Until pretending was the only thing I knew how to do. He dragged a trembling hand through his hair. When she left, she told me she wished she'd been honest from the start. That my proposal felt like a corner she'd been pushed into. I felt my breath hitch. That night at the bonfire, he said, when I saw you standing there, when the words fell out of my mouth, I panicked. I thought, God, what if I'm doing it again? What if you feel obligated? What if I ruin the one thing that's real in my life? His voice broke, gentle as a twig under snow, and I couldn't bear to lose you the same way. He finally fell silent, the kind of silence that isn't empty, the kind that has survived a storm. I reached out slowly, letting my fingers rest against the back of his hand. His skin was cold, or maybe mine was. The lamp hummed again, a small reminder that the world hadn't stopped turning, even if it felt like we had. Marcus, I whispered, you're not him anymore, and I'm not her. His shoulders loosened just a little, like a thread finally letting go of the needle. But somewhere in the quiet, I felt it. The past wasn't done with us. Not yet. And love, as soft as it was, would have to stand in the doorway between who he had been and who he hoped he could become with me. The rain had been falling for hours, not the kind that taps softly at the windows, but the kind that arrives with a weight, as if the sky is trying to wash something clean. I stood by the lamp in my living room, watching the water stream down the glass. It moved in crooked lines, like handwriting from someone too tired to steady their hand. Somewhere in the distance, a car door shut. A shadow crossed the porch light. And then, 3 slow knocks. It was the kind of sound that makes the whole house inhale. Healing doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it takes the shape of quiet mornings, slow dinners, and conversations that start with, I didn't know how to say this before. Marcus and I had been walking through that kind of quiet. Not together, but not apart either. Just suspended. He texted me sometimes. Short messages. Careful messages. Messages that felt like he had rewritten them twice before hitting send. And I found myself answering with the same softness, like we were both afraid to break whatever fragile thing. We were rebuilding. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. But there were corners of it, empty chairs, unfinished sentences, that reminded me of the truth he had finally shared. The proposal that broke him, the fear that built him, and the joke that wasn't a joke at all. Some nights I still heard his voice saying, I wanted to mean it. I just didn't know if I was allowed to. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. A long, tired sound. I wasn't expecting anyone, and no one sane would be out in a storm like this. Yet the knocks came again, softer this time, almost apologetic. I wrapped my sweater tighter and walked toward the door. When I opened it, the rain rushed in like cold smoke. Marcus stood there, soaked from head to toe, hair plastered to his forehead, breathing like he had run the whole way. But it was his eyes that stopped me. Wide, red, bay. He didn't say anything. Not at first. He just reached into his pocket, his hand shaking so hard I could hear the metal click. Then he pulled out a small velvet box. Not a joke this time, not a dare, not a careless moment around a fire. He held it the way someone holds something fragile, something they aren't sure they deserve. And before I could form a single word, he fell to his knees. Right there on the wet ground, water splashed around him. His jeans darkened. His palms pressed against the porch as if he needed something solid to hold himself up. Please, he whispered, his voice barely stronger than the rain. I need you to hear me. The storm roared behind him, but he stayed steady, kneeling, waiting. I felt my breath catch somewhere high in my chest. Marcus, I said softly, you're freezing. He laughed once, a broken, trembling sound. I know, he said, but I couldn't wait another minute. He opened the velvet box with clumsy fingers. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, imperfect. The kind of ring someone chooses after staring at 100 others and rejecting each one because it didn't feel honest enough. Rain dripped down his face, mingling with tears he wasn't trying to hide. I love you, he said. The words weren't smooth. They weren't rehearsed. They fell out of him like a confession he'd been carrying too long. I'm terrified, he added, voice cracking. I'm terrified of repeating the past, of losing you, of wanting too much. He looked at the ring like it might disappear if he stopped looking at it. But I'm not running anymore, he said. And I'm not hiding behind jokes. I'm not asking because I'm broken. I'm asking because, finally, I'm certain. He lifted his head then, slowly, cautiously, as if my face might be the answer to every question he'd ever feared. Choose me, he whispered. Not because anyone expects you to, not because I'm on my knees. Choose me with open eyes. The rain softened around us, as if even the sky was waiting. And for the first time in weeks, maybe months, I saw him clearly. The softness, the fear, the hope. The man he was trying to grow into. I stepped out onto the porch, letting the rain touch my skin, letting the moment settle between us, like a breath held too long. His eyes followed me, searching, waiting. I knelt down beside him, my hand brushing the soaked fabric of his sleeve. You're trembling, I murmured. I know, he said. I don't want to lose you. I took the ring from the box. It was warm from his hand, but cold from the storm. When I looked at him, really looked, the smile came on its own, quiet, gentle, without hesitation. Marcus, I whispered. This time, we choose each other. He closed his eyes, a breath of relief escaping him. And somewhere in that rain-soaked night, our future began. Not with certainty, but with honesty.